Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. My name is Alexis Velasquez, and I'll be your host. Today's discussion is about eating disorders. Yes, I know. Eating disorders is a tough topic, but it's something that I've struggled with, like many of you. This episode isn't about me, though. It's going to be about my good friend Abigail Nix. Abby, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
She's not actually here with us today, but I will include voice clips she gave me permission to use from an interview I had with her earlier this week. Anyways, let's cut to the chase. In case you don't know what an eating disorder is, Healthline states eating disorders are psychological conditions that cause unhealthy eating habits and extreme focus on food, weight, or body shape. During our interview, Abigail explained to me that she dealt with anorexia and binge eating disorder for most of her teenage years. If you don't know what binge eating disorder is, Healthline says people with BED may eat a lot of food in a short amount of time, even if they aren't hungry. Emotional stress or de-stress often plays a role and might trigger a period of binge eating. Now, if you don't know what anorexia is, Mayo Clinic says it's often simply called anorexia. It is an eating disorder characterized by an abnormally low body weight, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a distorted perception of weight. By these definitions, we can clearly see that this is not a healthy way to live. I began to become curious about the connection of the two disorders because it seemed that they were on the complete opposite of the spectrum. This is when I began to ask her how she started dealing with both. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, so I would go through periods where I would eat a lot, sit down in the kitchen on the floor and just rummage through the drawers and eat anything and everything that I could.
So, imagine this, a young girl on the floor of her kitchen floor. She's indulging in all of her favorite snacks. Her stomach starts to hurt, but she can't seem to stop. The food is consuming her every thought and emotion because it makes her feel numb to life. It makes her feel better for a while. Then she is consumed by guilt. She wants to hide from everybody because she is disgusted with what she just did to herself. She knows it was wrong. She doesn't want to end up fat because her family will lose respect for her like they have for every other fat person in their family. Let's hear it from Abby.
After binging, I would feel really grossed out, physically sick, mentally just drained, and regretting all of the food I ate. And it made me feel guilty, and I was afraid of gaining weight because that was a really big thing with my family. Everyone in my family is really thin except for a couple of people. And my family would always talk about them behind their backs, about how they're overweight, and other people in my family dealt with eating disorders and I guess body dysmorphia.
With all that being said, don't be afraid to talk to someone about these issues because it's way more common than you might think. I conducted a survey along with this interview that contained 34 participants. Like Abby, 26.5% of those 34 people deal with binge eating disorder, and 11.8% deal with anorexia. With all of the knowledge we have about Abby now, I really wanted to dig deep on why she felt she really started to deal with an eating disorder. I first wanted to ask Abby where she came from and the financial situation her and her family were in. In the interview with Abby, she told me that she's from San Mateo, California. She lived with her stepdad and mom, and she said that they were about lower to middle class. She said that the people around her definitely had more money and both parents, which equaled to more stable households. She also told me that her household wasn't always the healthiest for a child to live in. In the interview I conducted, most people that grew up in a poor household and or grew up in an abusive or toxic environment dealt with eating disorders. When we go back to the definition of a binge eating disorder, it says that emotional stress or de-stress often plays a role and might trigger a period of binge eating. This clearly shows the connection between the two. A person in a high-stress environment might turn to something like food to suppress any emotions they're dealing with. In the interview, I asked Abby at what age did she feel that body image most concerned her. She told me her body image issues started around the age 13 and 14, which coincidentally was around the same time she got social media. In my survey, one of my questions was, approximately what was the age you started struggling with body image? The highest percentage of the age number that I got back was 8 years old, at 23.5% of 34 people. The second highest percentage was 11.8% at 15 years old that people started struggling with body image. Two of the questions in my survey revolved around social media because I felt that when I was talking to Abby in the interview, she said how she did feel social media played a big part in the way she viewed herself. So one of the questions I asked was, do you feel that social media played a role in how you viewed yourself? And a whopping 88.2% of people said that it did. The survey consisted of both male and female answers, with about 61.8% of female answered and 38.2% of male answers. So we can see that gender had no boundary with social media. Staying on the topic of peers, I also wanted to ask her about some of the friends she had in high school, middle school, or throughout her education in her younger years. In the interview, she tells me about some friends she had in high school. She had a friend that was anorexic and one that was bulimic. Her friends would talk about their experiences in a more positive way to her, and she told me that that made her want to indulge in those habits. She saw them as positive experiences. I asked her if she ever felt that her friends would make this a competition almost, and she said yes, completely. One of the things she said in the interview was, if I looked like you, all of my problems would be solved. In the podcast, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the family situation and see if they had any negative impact on her body image and what she looked like. Earlier in the podcast, we saw that little clip of her saying that her family would talk poorly about overweight family members, and so gaining weight was a really big fear of hers. I tried to ask her about direct relationships she had in her family, as opposed to a general example, like the one that was just said. She spoke about her mom and her cousin mostly. She said her mom had a negative body image. Let's take a look.
But she definitely had a negative body image, and I saw a lot of that in my childhood. The way she would talk about herself, the way she would look at herself, the way she would dress, and that stuck with me, and it influenced a lot of my thoughts about myself.
It is more than likely that if somebody has dealt with an eating disorder, it's because somebody else in their family has also dealt with an eating disorder. One of the questions in my survey asked, did anyone in your family show signs of an eating disorder? Example, they would limit their food intake. From the 34 responses that I got, 67.6% said no, but 32.4% said yes. With all of the information shared in this podcast, I want you guys to remember that you are not alone. As you can see, eating disorders are something that young and older people deal with. When I was ending the interview with Abigail, I wanted to ask her one final question. What was her current relationship to food? She said on a scale from 1 to 10, it was about 6 or 7. She has some bad days still, but she doesn't restrict or binge as much as she used to. The survey I conducted, about 50% of the people that responded said that they're still working on their relationship to food. That being said, an eating disorder is definitely a process that doesn't get fixed overnight. Here's some advice from Abby.
When I feel like binging, my go-to is just to chug a bunch of water because I know I'm probably dehydrated, and that's usually a trigger for me too. Is like if I'm thirsty, I confuse it with hunger, and um, and then I usually like I'll eat like a granola bar or something with protein, like a banana, because that usually fills me up, and then I don't feel like the desire to binge anymore. You know, I have more knowledge now than I did back then, so I know how to like compensate for those feelings, and I know what my body needs more.
I wanted to include some of the advice my survey takers provided at the end of the survey. I asked, what's some advice you would give someone dealing with an eating disorder? Someone said, don't imagine yourself as someone else. Someone said, worry about yourself only. You feeling good is most important. People will always talk anyway. Somebody else said, stay away from processed foods, more poultry and fish than red meat, lots of greens and fruits. Someone else said, this is something I heard from someone. Don't give you a hard time with food. You will regret about not enjoying it later. Just eat healthy, exercise, and hydrate. There's many things in life than worrying about how your body looks. Someone else said, you only live once. Enjoy it because tomorrow is not promised. Someone said, everyone is unique in their own skin. Everyone is different in a good way. And a lot of other ones said to go talk to somebody, go find professional help and educate yourself as much as possible on how body uses food as fuel. If you're dealing with an eating disorder now, just know that you're not alone. I hope that this podcast made that a point. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in the next episode.